Hey guys, this is the Toy Collector and I'm going to be reading American Girl Adding Finding Freedom where I left off in my last video. Chapter 12, Something Pretty. Early on Saturday morning, Addie sent out on her errands and deliveries for Miss Ford. She brought a bill to a customer on Society Hill. Then she went to the dry goods store for a few blocks away to pick up supplies that Miss Ford had ordered. The thread buttons, ribbon and fringe were wrapped into one parcel before Addie left the store. Addie held on to her parcel tightly as she stepped around the slush and dirty puddles in the streets. On the way to her next stop, she passed one of the windows of Mr. Diamante's second-hand shop. Sometimes she and Mama went there to look for clothes or pots and pans. The socks Addie had on today had come from Mr. Diamante's. There was a small darn in the heel of one sock, but the other was as good as new. Addie stopped for a minute to look in the window. Lying among the used shoes, wool caps, and old belts was a bright patch of red cloth. It looked like the corner of a scarf, but most of it was hidden behind a rusty tea kettle. Addie went inside to take a closer look. Mr. Diamante recognized her right away. Good morning, Addie, he said in his jolly way. What brings you here today? Can I see that red scarf in the window? Addie asked. Mr. Diamante reached into the window display and moved the tea kettle so he could lift out the scarf and hand it to Addie. It's a beauty, he said. Hardly looks worn. Addie unfolded the scarf. It looked like it was like new. The red fabric was soft and smooth. Addie held it up to her cheek. Right then she knew she wanted Mama to have the scarf. Mama would have something pretty like this. Mama should have something pretty like this, thought Addie. She worked so hard. She looks so beautiful in this when we go to the Christmas service at church. Addie was almost afraid to ask about the price, but she looked up at Mr. Diamante. How much it cost? She asked. 20 cents, answered Mr. Diamante. It's a good price for something that looks like it's never been worn. Addie was discouraged. She didn't have 20 cents, but she had to buy that scarf somehow. Please, Mr. Diamante, she said, could you put it away for me? I'm going to try my best to get the money to buy it. Well, I'll put it back behind the rusty tea kettle again. That rusty kettle again, asked Mr. Diamante. You're the only person who's spotted it since I put it in the window last week. It'll probably stay there a little longer. I hope so, said Addie as she carefully folded the scarf and handed it back to Mr. Diamante. The feel of the soft material and its bright red color stayed in Addie's mind as she headed back to Miss Ford's shop. How am I gonna get 20 cents? She wondered. Back at the shop, Miss Ford had 3 packages for her to deliver, all wrapped in brown paper. These go to Society Hill, said Miss Ford. as she handed them the Addy. "Be careful, don't splash mud on them." "Yes, ma'am," said Addy. The streets were busier that afternoon than they were in the morning. Addy had to dodge around throngs of people bustling in and out of shops. The packages were clumsy, and she worried about dropping them on the sloopy sidewalks. After Mama had worked so hard, Addie wanted to make sure the dresses were delivered in perfect condition. The last delivery was on Spruce Street. As Addie walked toward the address, she saw an old man lighting the street lamps. The lamps cast a golden glow on the wet sidewalks. When Addie got to the house, she rang the bell and waited for the big door to open. A maid finally came, and Addie handed her the last bundle. "This is from Miss Ward's shop," she said proudly. The maid took the package and handed Addie 5 pennies. Addie thanked her and turned away. As she walked back down Spruce Street, she curled her fingers around the coins inside her mitten. Suddenly, Addie had an idea. She decided to stop by Mr. Delmonte's shop again on the way home, just to be sure the soft red scarf was still there. As she approached the store, Mr. Delmonte was just locking up. "Don't worry, Addie," he said. "The scarf is still here. I moved it off in the corner a bit, but you can see it if you know where to look." The two of them stood in the window together. Mr. Delmonte headed down the street, but Addie stayed at the window thinking about her idea. "If I put half my chips in the milk bottle," she thought, "and keep the other half, maybe I could save enough money to buy the scarf for Mama." Addie lingered a little longer, staring at the scarf in the fading light, thinking how pretty Mama would look in it. Then she headed back to Miss Ford's shop. By the time she got to the shop, her feet were numb with cold and her nose felt frozen. "You look frozen stiff, child," said Miss Ford, peering above her spectacles. Miss Ford had a tape measure draped around her neck. Mama had a ribbon thrown across one shoulder, and she sewed fringe on the end of a sash. They looked busy. Addie knew she shouldn't bother them. "Mama, can I light the stove upstairs now?" asked Addie. "Please?" "No, Addie," Mama answered. "You know we don't light the stove until I start cooking supper. You head on upstairs. I'll be up as soon as I finish this sash. Then we'll light the stove." "Yes, Mama," said Addie. As she headed out the door, she heard Miss Ford ask Mama, "How is everything up in the garret?" "Everything is fine," Mama answered quickly. "We get by." Addie wanted to turn around and tell Miss Ford the truth, that it was freezing in the garrets, and dark and sometimes very lonely on the plantation. Addie had been allowed to spend more time with Mama than she was here. She wanted to tell Miss Ford about the broken window and the snow on the floor. But Addie knew Mama would not want her to complain. "We get by," Addie said softly to herself as she climbed the stairs. When she got to the top, she lit the candle on the table. Addy turned her mitten upside down and let her tip money fall onto the table. She brought the milk bottle from behind the stove and set it next to the money. Then Addy went over to the bed and lifted one corner up a corner of the mattress. Then she found a kerchief that she had brought from the plantation when she and Mama had escaped from slavery. Then in one corner was the half-dime Uncle Solomon had given her. It was the only money they had when they headed north for freedom. Freedom's got its cost. Freedom's got its cost, Uncle Solomon had said when he gave it to Addy. She had saved it for something very special, something important. Addy brought the kerchief over to the table and divided her tip money into two piles. She dropped one pile in the milk bottle and then carefully tied the other coins into the corner of her kerchief. With Uncle Solomon's half-dime, she had 10 cents in her kerchief. That was half of what she needed for Mama's red scarf. I'm halfway there, Addy thought to herself. The thought made her so happy she didn't think about the cold. Chapter 13. Freedom Ain't Free. At church the next morning, Mama and Addy sat side by side in the women's section. Addy looked across the aisle where the men sat and imagined that someday Papa would be sitting over there, smiling, giving her a wink that said, "You my favorite girl." When the deep notes of the organ sounded, everyone stood to sing. The first song was one of Addy's favorites. Auntie Lula had taught it to her back on the plantation. Addy sang out with the others in joy. After a long prayer, Reverend Drake began his sermon. I want to begin this morning by reading from the book of Luke. Turn to chapter 2, verses 6 and 7. Mama took a Bible from the rack on the pew in front of them. Addy helped her find the passage. Reverend Drake said, "This passage I'm about to read to you is about Mary and Joseph. Addy and Mama and the other members followed along as Reverend Drake read. And she brought forth her firstborn son wrapped in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn." Now this is the story of Christmas, the story of the birth of Jesus. The time had come for Mary to give birth to Jesus. Let me tell you, people, time is a curious thing. It can't be stopped like a clock, Reverend Drake said. "You're right, Reverend," one church member called out. "Time keeps right on moving." And I'm here to tell you the time for freedom has to come for thousands of our people. These freedmen are waiting right now in Washington, D.C. and other cities, and they need our help. Stay with me now, Reverend Drake preached. Think with me because I'm here to tell you this morning freedom ain't free. A church member shouted back, "You preaching the truth." Addie scooted over closer to Mama and laid her head on Mama's shoulder. Mama put her arm around Addie and rocked gently on the pew. Addie liked coming to church. Anyone who wanted to take part in the service could take part in the service. If you feel like answering the Reverend, you could. If you feel like crying or laughing or clapping to the music the choir sang, you could. Reverend Drake continued, "Some of you already know what I'm talking about because there was a time when you came to freedom and you found out what freedom was about. It wasn't free. You needed food to eat, clothes to wear, a place to stay." "Amen," replied Mama. "I'm here to tell you people, time ain't gonna stop for those thousands of freedmen who need our help. As I speak to you, babies are being born and children are hungry, and mothers and fathers have no place to lay their heads at night. They need our help now, today," Reverend Drake said, his voice getting louder. Addie looked up at Mama and saw tears running down her face. Addie gave Mama a little hug. As we enter the season of Advent, that time for preparing for Christmas, let God work through you. When the collection boxes are passed this morning, remember to put in a little extra for our Freedmen's Fund. These people are your cousins, your brothers and sisters, your mothers and fathers, Reverend Drake said, pounding on the pulpit. It may mean you have to sacrifice. If you can't give of your money, give of your time. Next Saturday, a group of freedmen are coming in at the pier. Come help us welcome them to freedom. I close by saying freedom can be a lonely walk through the wilderness and dark, but you can make a difference between a lonely night and one filled with light and hope. On the way home from church, Mama and Addie walked hand in hand, humming "This Little Light of Mine." Even though it was cold out, Addie felt a warm glow inside. "I've been thinking about what Reverend Drake said this morning," said Mama slowly. "He made me remember how it was for you and me when we first came to Philadelphia. We had nothing. The church helped us. when we needed it. Now we done saved it more than $1.50. The freedmen need our help right now. They need our savings more than we do. We can get along without a lamp, but they can't get along without help. What do you think? At first, Addie did not say anything. It was true, she and Mama could get along without the lamp, but they saved so hard for it. A lamp would help her see better when she did her homework. And it would help Mama when she had to sew late at night. Addie could imagine how nice it would be to have a lamp when Sam and Papa and Esther returned. When their family was at last together again, she could picture their faces glowing in the bright light as they gathered around the dinner table. But then she remembered how scared and lonely she and Mama had been when they first came to Philadelphia, and how the church had helped them find work, a place to live, and friends. I think we should give our money to the church, Addie said. Other people helped us. The money might even help Sam or Papa or Esther come to us. Even if it don't, replied Mama, it's gonna help somebody, that's what's important. She squeezed Addie's hand. We'll give the church our money next Sunday. With a pang of guilt, Addie remembered the 10 cents she had knotted it up in a kerchief. Should she give that to help the freedmen too? No, thought Addie. I can't give that money away. It's for Mama's Christmas surprise. Addie decided to keep the money. She was determined to buy the scarf and show Mama how much she loved her. She would find another way to help the freedmen. Mama, she asked, can I go to the pier next Saturday to help out with the freedmen? I think that would be fine, Addie, Mama said. Just so you finish all of your Miss Ford's deliveries. I will, Mama, Addie promised. Chapter 14, The Cost of Freedom. When Eddie arrived at the pier the next Saturday, Reverend Rick was already handing out old clothes and blankets to help the people who had just gotten off the boat. Sarah and her mother were there just as they had been when Addie and Mama arrived in Philadelphia last summer. Addie was glad to see them. What am I supposed to say to these folks? Addie asked Sarah. You ain't got to say nothing special, Sarah said. Just be yourself. I wish I could be like you, Addie said. When you met us, you made me feel like I was coming home. I was scared the day I met you. Sarah admitted. And look how good things turned out for us. The pier was slick with mud, garbage floated in the dark icy water, and the newly freed people huddled together in silent groups. They looked cold, frightened, hungry, and lost. Addie closed her eyes for a second. Esther, Sam, Papa, be here, Addie wished. But when she opened her eyes, there were no familiar faces in the crowd. Addie's heart sank. Just then she saw a thin woman who held a bundle in her arms. Addie heard a sharp cry. For a second, Addie thought it was Esther crying, and her heart started to pound. Then she saw a little hand reach up from the bundle. Quickly, Addie pulled her shawl around from around her shoulders and handed it to the woman. Who thanked her and wrapped the shawl around her baby. Addie held out her arms. I can carry the baby if you like, she said. I'll be careful. The woman smiled weakly. Thank you kindly, she said. She handed the baby to Addie. Addie cradled the baby in her arms, just as she used to cradle Esther. The baby's eyes were bright as buttons. Addie held the baby close to her chest, hoping to warm her. The baby waved her arms and grabbed the cowrie necklace Addie wore around her neck. The baby's mother smiled. She like you, she said. She don't take a shine to just anybody. The woman rode back to the church in the wagon that Reverend Drake had brought, along with an old man who was coughing so hard his whole body shook. Another man in the wagon had been limping with a stick he used as a crutch. His foot was bandaged in dirty rags. Eddie looked at the poor tired people who plodded along behind the wagon. Some had no shoes, others wore tattered clothes. Eddie held the baby closer to her, trying to keep her warm. Where are you all from? Eddie asked the baby's mother. We coming up from Baltimore, said the woman. All the slaves on our plantation was turned out about a month ago. We was told we was free and we had to get. But we ain't had nowhere to go. No food, no nothing. Me and some others walked together for a week. We ate almost nothing but grass. We walked until we got to Baltimore. Things gonna be better here, promised Daddy. The people at the church helped me and my mama. They'll help you too. When the wagon arrived back at church, Addie led the woman to fellowship hall in the basement. The big room was warm, dry, and filled with the smell of delicious food. Many church members were there to help serve food to the freed men. Addie remembered how happy she and Mama had been in this same place eating their first warm meal of freedom. On their first day in Philadelphia. She said goodbye to the woman. "You be safe now," she said. "People in the church gonna be your family." Addy hugged the baby one last time. Memories of Esther filled her mind, and she squeezed her eyes tight to stop the tears. Then Addy left to go to Miss Ford's. Back at the shop there were more errands to do and 3 deliveries to make. Addy hurried along the busy street. She saw women in fancy hats and fur coats carrying packages wrapped in bright paper. Usually Addy would have been fascinated with their fine clothes and fancy manners. But today they seemed silly. Addy remembered the people shivering at the pier. A man in a top hat strolled by swinging a fine walking stick. Addy thought of the man at the pier with his foot in dirty bandages. When Addy made a delivery to one of the biggest houses on Society Hill, all she could think of were the freedmen who had arrived that morning. None of them had a place to stay at all. Addy got tips from the first 2 houses she went to. The coins jingled in her mitten, and she began to think cheerfully about the scarf that she would soon be able to buy for Mama. If she got a 5-cent tip from her last delivery, she would have just enough for the scarf. Addy began to walk faster. Her last delivery was the beautiful plaid dress for Isabella Hallwell. It was the dress Mama had worked the hardest on. Addy was very proud to be delivering it. She lifted a shiny brass knuckle on the front door and banged it loudly 3 times. Soon a woman came. "Who are you?" she asked coldly. "I'm Addy Walker. This here is a dress from Miss Ford's dress shop. It's for Isabella Hallwell." "Very well then," said the maid, as she took the package. "Wait here." Addy stood in the entrance to the Hallwell's mansion. The house looked more beautiful than any house she'd ever seen. A staircase of dark wood curved up to the 2nd floor. A staircase of dark wood curved up to the second floor. Addie could see into the living room. Addie could see into the living room too. Addie could see into the living room too. She saw a high-backed pink couch and pink chairs instead of kerosene lamps. The room had gas lamps, each one lighted and covered by a glass globe. In the corner, a decorated Christmas tree reached up to the ceiling. The lamplight filled the room with a rosy glow and a fire burned in the hearth. The maid returned shortly and pressed a coin into Addie's hand. "Here's a tip for you, child. Now run along," she said, hurrying Addie out the door. Addie was outside. The big door had closed behind her before she looked at the coin in her hand. She couldn't believe what she saw. "A dime," said Addie out loud. "A whole dime!" It was the biggest tip Addie had ever gotten. She slid it into her mitten. Now she had enough for Mama's scarf. She even had a little extra to put in the milk bottle to start saving for the lamp again. Addie skipped down the walk and ran all the way back to the shop. She didn't even stop in to see Mama and Miss Ford. Instead, she ran upstairs and took her kerchief out from under the mattress. She untied the knot and let the coins fall onto the table. She turned her mitten upside down and dumped the tips she had made that day into the pile of money. Carefully, she counted 20 cents from Mama's scarf. Then she dropped the rest of the money in the milk bottle. The 20 cents went into her mitten. She would get this scarf this afternoon after she finished her errands. She could hardly wait. Addie's last chore of the day was to get Miss Ford's scissors sharpened. The sharpener's shop was not too far from Mr. Del Monte's shop. If Addie hurried, she could get the scissors sharpened and buy the scarf before it got dark. The grinding wheel that sharpened the scissors made a loud whining noise, so Addie waited outside. People pushed past her in a hurry to get home. Streetcars clanged and carriages rushed by, but she hardly noticed them. All she could think about was Mama's beautiful scarf and how surprised she would be on Christmas morning. A woman pushing a fancy baby buggy wheeled toward Addie and stopped in front of the shop. The buggy was too big to fit through the door, so the woman parked it next to Addie and lifted out a little baby all bundled in soft, fleecy blankets. The baby started to fuss. Suddenly Addie remembered the baby she held that morning. Then she began to think about Esther. "My sister might not be as lucky as that baby at the pier. Who's gonna give her money to come to freedom? Give money for her to come to freedom." Addie felt the coin she held inside her mitten. It was only 20 cents, but everyone gave as much as possible. But if everyone gave as much as possible, then all the newly freed people would could get to the north. Maybe even Esther. Addie stood quietly by herself for a minute, heart aching with the memory of her baby sister. Then she turned and went inside to pick up the scissors. Addie headed toward Mr. Del Monte's door. It was still open. She could see the pretty red scarf tucked behind the tea kettle in the window. But Addie didn't go inside. Instead, she walked on down the street for a few more blocks till she came to the church. With both hands, she pulled open the heavy door. She walked over to the box at the side of the church. Above it was a sign that said Freedmen's Fund. Slowly Addie took off her mitten. One by one she dropped her coins into the box. The last coin was the half-dime Uncle Solomon had given her. She remembered the words that he said, the words he said to her. Freedom's got its cost. Then she thought of Esther and Papa still waiting to take their freedom. Then she thought of Esther, Sam, and Papa still waiting to take their freedom. And she let the half-dime clink into the box with the rest of her money. When Addie got back to the shop, she could have seen Mama and Miss Ford through the window. They were sitting next to the stove with their heads bent over their sewing. Addie knew that they were working on the last two dresses that had to be done before Christmas. Both women looked up when Addie came through the door. There won't be any more deliveries today, said Miss Ford. Run along now, Addie, said Mama. I'll be up soon to start supper. As Addie turned to leave, Miss Ford spoke again. There's no sense in you going upstairs. Stay here with me and your mother. Addie turned around and looked at Miss Ford and then at Mama. She couldn't believe her ears. Did Miss Ford say she could stay in the shop? Miss Mama said, Addie will be all right upstairs, Miss Ford. I know you running a business here, and you don't want children in the shop. I know I've said that in the past, Miss Ford said to Mama, but I believe that Addie has served my business well, and I don't think she'll be in the way. Addie stood at the door with her back against the knob. She looked at Mama, who looked puzzled. Addie was puzzled too. She had no idea what Miss Ford was up to. Take this, Miss Ford said to Addie. She handed Addie a needle book with two shiny needles inside. While your mother and I are working, you can keep yourself busy. I know your mother's taught you how to make a hem. Here is a plain apron you can practice on. Oh, thank you, Miss Ford, Addie said. There's no need to thank me, Miss Ford said as she went back to her sewing. Come sit on this crate by me, Mama said. I'll keep an eye on your stitches. Addie sat down next to Mama and spread the white apron across her lap. She smoothed it out and then threaded the needle and knotted it tight. She picked up the corner of the apron and started to sew the hem. Carefully and slowly Addy went about her task. She concentrated hard on her stitches, making them even and straight. Addy was glad to have a job to do. It helped her get her mind off the scarf, but more than anything, she was glad to be with Mama.